You are tired of waiting, tired of praying for the same thing for months, perhaps for years, and feeling like heaven has gone silent. You look around and see people achieving exactly what you have been asking the Almighty for. You see people who don't even value what they have, receiving blessing upon blessing. And you who wake up at dawn to pray, who bend your knees, who trust with all your strength, remain stuck in the same place. If this is your reality right now, pay attention, because today the Almighty wants to tell you something that will completely change the way you view this waiting. What is meant for you will not pass you by. Not in your time, not when you want it, but in God's perfect timing. And this perfect timing is not random, it is not a work of chance. It was marked before you were even born. In this video, I will reveal to you why the Almighty is holding back what you are asking for so much, what the spiritual signs are that prove your promise is on the way, and what you need to do now, this very day, so as not to lose what is already yours by right in the spiritual realm. Pay close attention. What you are going to hear here is not empty motivation. It is a prophetic word. And if you reached this video, it was no coincidence. It was the Almighty who brought you here. There is a spiritual reason why you clicked on this content, and throughout this message you will understand why. Let me ask you a question before we proceed. How many times have you said in your prayer, Lord, how long? How many times have you looked in the mirror and asked yourself if what you have been asking for will ever come? If you are over 35, you have probably experienced this moment more times than you would like to admit. That instant when you sit on the edge of your bed, turn off the light, look at the ceiling, and feel the weight of the weight crushing your chest. That silent pain that no one understands. Not your husband, not your wife, not your children, not your brothers in the church. Only you and the Almighty know the size of what you are carrying inside. And the truth that almost no one has the courage to tell you is this. This weight is not punishment. It is not abandonment. It is not a sign that the Almighty has forgotten you. This weight is preparation. The Almighty is not ignoring you. The Almighty is building you. And that is what we are going to talk about now, point by point. That is why I have prepared a powerful digital book for you. If inside your heart you have already realized that this weight has turned from a test of faith into something greater, if you look back and see signs that repeat themselves, dreams that return, words that arrive from different places saying the same thing, do not ignore it. Many people see, but few understand. There are people who spend their entire lives receiving warnings from heaven and never stop to listen. You are not one of those people. If you are here, it is because you have a spiritual responsibility over your family, your home, your children and grandchildren. And the Almighty is calling you to wake up. The book is called How to Know If You Are Saved for the Day of Judgment. The link is in the description of this video and also pinned at the top of the comments. Thousands of Brazilians have already received this material and have sent me messages in tears, telling me how the reading changed their prayer routine, how it restored marriages that seemed dead, how it brought back children who had drifted away from the faith. This content could be taken down at any moment because of the strong message it carries, so don't leave it for later. If you felt something different in your chest right now, comment Amen down below and click the link. This is the time. Returning. The Almighty is preparing the perfect timing, and preparation in the view of heaven means three very specific things that almost no one explains. The first of them is refinement. Before delivering the promise, the Almighty refines the vessel that will receive it. Have you ever stopped to think why so many people who win the lottery end up more unhappy than when they were poor? Why couples who fall in love too quickly and marry without preparation end in divorce after so little time? Why do people who rise quickly in life fall even faster? The answer is simple and painful. The vessel was not ready. And the Almighty, who loves you too much to give you a blessing that will destroy you, prefers to make you wait. He prefers to polish you. He prefers to teach you how to carry the weight of that which you ask for so desperately. Think with me. If you asked for a restored marriage today, but you still carry deep resentment in your chest, what would happen? You would receive that marriage and destroy it again in a few months, because unhealed resentment is a ticking time bomb. If you asked for your own home today, but you still haven't learned to manage the little you have in your account, what would happen? You would lose that house in a short time, because a house is not sustained by salary alone, it is sustained by financial wisdom. If you asked for a child today but you haven't yet healed the wounded child that exists within you, what would happen? You would repeat with that child the same patterns your parents repeated with you. And the Almighty, who is a loving Father, will not allow that. That is why He waits. That is why He delays. That is why it seems the answer is taking longer than it should. But with each passing day, if your eyes are open, the Almighty is transforming you. He is changing your conversation. He is changing your patience. He is changing the way you see money, the way you see relationships, and the way you see your own history. And when you look back a few months or years from now, you will realize that the delay was not a delay. It was construction. And the blessing that arrived because now you can handle it. Before you wouldn't have been able to, and the blessing itself would have turned into a curse in your hands. If you have been feeling exhausted in the midst of this refining process, if you have thought about giving up more than once, understand now that this exhaustion is part of the process, not the end. That is why I prepared a powerful digital book for you. How to Know If You Are Saved for the Day of Judgment is available via the link in the description and at the top of the comments. This is not the moment to hold back. The Almighty did not bring you this far for you to close this video with the same doubts you had when you started. Click now. Tomorrow may be too late. Let's move to the second thing this wait represents, the alignment of the people around you. Have you ever considered that your blessing might be delayed because the right people haven't entered your life yet, or because the wrong people haven't left yet? The Almighty will not give you a marriage if the man or woman He has reserved for you is still in the process of being prepared on the other side of the country. The Almighty will not give you your dream job if the boss who will recognize your value is still going through their own struggles to mature their heart. The Almighty will not give you a family restoration if a member of that family still needs to go through one last breaking to truly surrender. It is not just about you. It is about a web of lives that need to align in God's perfect timing. And only the Almighty sees the entire chessboard. You see your house. He sees your entire neighborhood. You see a year. He sees a generation. You cry over a month of delay. He smiles because He knows that month will save you from a tragedy you cannot even imagine the scale of. Let me tell you a truth that many in the church do not mention. The delays of the Almighty are hidden deliverances. That job you didn't get after the interview was the job where you would have met the wrong person. That relationship that ended out of nowhere was the relationship that would have drowned you in emotional and financial debt. That door that slammed in your face was the door that led to a precipice you couldn't see. And the Almighty, even while you were crying, even while you were complaining, even while you were doubting, closed the door to protect you. You need to understand that waiting is not the opposite of an answer. Waiting is part of the answer. When the Almighty says wait, that is already an answer. It is not the absence of the Almighty. It is His active presence. The Almighty is working in the behind the scenes of your story, moving pieces you don't even know exist, touching the hearts of people you haven't even met yet, preparing circumstances that will only make sense years from now. Now, the third thing this waiting period represents is the right moment in history. And this is profound. There is a huge difference between your chronological time and spiritual time. The clock of the flesh measures seconds, minutes, hours, days. The clock of the Spirit measures maturity, purpose, kairos. You look at the calendar and see that 5, 10, 15 years have passed since you first started asking for the same thing. The Almighty looks at the same period and sees that you are not yet ready for the next chapter. And at the same time, He sees that the landscape around you is not yet ready to receive what He wants to deliver through you. Think of Moses. He spent 40 years in the palace being prepared in knowledge. Then he spent 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep, being broken of his pride. Only at 80 years old did the Almighty call him to liberate Israel. If the Almighty had raised Moses at 20, Egypt would have finished him. If He had raised him at 40, arrogance would have destroyed the mission. At 80, with a mouth calloused by silence and a heart broken by loss, he was ready. It was in God's perfect timing. Think of Joseph, sold by his own brothers at 17, a slave imprisoned unjustly, forgotten by the cupbearer. Only at 30 was he raised as governor of Egypt. 13 years of appearing condemned, but in truth, being formed. And when the moment arrived, he didn't just save his family. He saved an entire nation, saved a lineage, saved a promise that spanned centuries. If Joseph had been raised earlier, he would have fallen again. It was in God's perfect timing. Think of Anna. Years and years of praying for a son, humiliated by her husband's other wife, weeping in the temple to the point that the priest thought she was intoxicated. And when the Almighty opened her womb, it wasn't just Samuel who was born. The prophet who would anoint the first kings of Israel was born. The delay was not the Almighty saying no. It was the Almighty saying, what will be born of you is not just for you. It is for a nation. And for a nation, the moment must be exact. Now comes the question that might be burning inside you at this moment. How to know if my waiting is near its end? How to know if what I am asking for is on the way? There are clear spiritual signs, and I will show you what they are, one by one, because many people lose the promise by not recognizing the signs when they appear. The first sign is the growing discomfort with the place where you are. If you have felt in recent months that your environment has become too small, that conversations that once nourished you now drain you, that the job that sustained you for years has begun to suffocate you, this is not being picky. It is not ingratitude. This is a sign that the Almighty is preparing the next stage. When the bird is about to fly, the Almighty makes the nest uncomfortable. When the fruit is about to fall, the branch begins to loosen. You are not going crazy. You are close to a turning point. The second sign is the arrival of new people bringing specific messages. Have you noticed that when the Almighty is about to act, he starts sending messengers? You walk into a store, and the clerk says a phrase that answers exactly what you prayed for at dawn. You turn on the television, and the preacher who appears on the screen cites the verse you had highlighted in your Bible this week. You open WhatsApp, and a person you haven't seen in years sends a specific word. This is not chance, it is the Almighty confirming. Stay alert, write everything down. The Almighty is speaking. The third sign is the increase in spiritual attack. It seems contradictory, but when the blessing is near, the enemy stirs. You begin to have interrupted nights of sleep. You begin to feel a weight on your head for no apparent reason. You begin to receive bad news in succession. You begin to have friction with people who once loved you. And you think, am I doing something wrong? No, you are doing everything right. That is why the attack came. No one steals treasure from an empty house. If the enemy is bothered, it is because there is treasure to steal. Hold on tight. Wait, before moving on to the other signs, I need to tell you something important. If you are feeling this combination, the growing discomfort, the messengers appearing, the spiritual attack increasing, understand that the Almighty is positioning you for something great. And great blessings require great preparations. That is why I prepared a powerful digital book for you. How to Know If You Are Saved for the Day of Judgment was written exactly for this hour, for this phase you are going through right now. It teaches you how to interpret the signs that the Almighty has placed on your path, how to position yourself spiritually, to receive without losing, and how to protect your family from what many lose after the blessing arrives. The link is in the description and at the top of the comments. I receive messages weekly from readers saying things like, after this book, I understood that the delay was not a delay, it was protection. Others say, my marriage returned after I applied what is written. Still others, my children came back home after I started to pray as the book teaches. I won't stall you. If you are here until now, it is because something greater is happening. And this book may be removed from the platform at any moment because of the radical nature of the message. If you are 35 or older, if you have responsibility for a family, if you feel you are close to the turning point, click the link now. Comment I believe down below. If you are ready to receive what is meant for you will not pass you by. The fourth sign that the wait is near the end is internal. You begin to have peace even without having received. This is very important. Pay attention. There is a supernatural peace that the Almighty gives to the children who are about to receive. It is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is certainty. You wake up in the morning and for no apparent reason, you have the feeling that everything is all right. Even with bills tightening, even with health failing, even with a child far away. You feel a peace that the Bible calls the peace that surpasses all understanding. If you have been experiencing this peace lately, gladden your heart. It is the Almighty saying, "Rest, my son, rest, my daughter. It is almost time." The fifth sign is the appearance of opportunities that require immediate positioning. The Almighty will not force you to receive. The Almighty opens doors, but you are the one who walks through them. And when the hour comes, the Almighty puts opportunities in your path that require courage. An unexpected phone call, a proposal that appeared out of nowhere, an old contact that returned, an idea that won't leave your head. If you have been receiving these internal or external invitations, pay attention. It is not for you to leave it for tomorrow. The Almighty is moving. Your part is to obey. Now I need you to understand something that almost no one talks about in churches. There is a huge difference between waiting in the Almighty and waiting from the Almighty. Many people confuse the two and therefore miss the blessing. Waiting in the Almighty means trusting, resting, not despairing. Waiting from the Almighty in the wrong way means staying still, crossing your arms, and thinking that the answer will fall from heaven like a ripe mango. It won't. The promise comes, but it comes through an attitude of yours in God's perfect timing. You need to have your eyes open, your heart ready, and your hands willing to act when the sign appears. Let me give you a very practical, everyday example. You prayed for a better job for 3 years. Suddenly a friend calls you for an interview, but you are in the middle of a busy week, full of obligations, saying you will leave it for next month. If you leave it for next month, the position will go to someone else. The Almighty opened the door. You are the one who needs to walk through it. The promise does not replace action. The promise directs the action. Another example, you prayed for the restoration of your marriage. Suddenly, your spouse has an opening, a rare moment of vulnerability, and wants to talk about something that happened. And you, hurt, wounded, with your pride speaking louder, decide not to talk that day. There was the door. There was the answer. If you don't go through it, the door closes, and the next one won't open for a long time. The Almighty opens it. You go through. Take this moment now to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tap the bell to turn on notifications. This isn't just YouTuber fluff. It's a practical way to ensure that the next prophetic words reach you in God's perfect timing. Often, the Lord places a message on your path exactly on the day you need it most, and if you aren't subscribed, you miss it. Do it now, and leave here below in one word what you are waiting for from the Almighty in this season. Just one word. Healing, marriage, job, children, restoration. We will pray together for every single one of those comments. Pay attention, because now I'm going to tell you the biggest mistakes that cause a person to lose what the Almighty has prepared for them, and this could save your story. The first mistake is forcing it. There are people who got tired of waiting and decided to take matters into their own hands. This reminds me of the story of Abraham and Sarah. The Almighty had promised a son. Years passed. Nothing. Sarah, tired, suggested that Abraham father a child with their servant. Ishmael was born. And to this day the world bears the consequences of that forcing. The son of the promise, Isaac, came later, in the time of the Almighty. But the son of despair, Ishmael, was also born, and he brought a line of conflict that crosses generations. When you force a blessing out of time, you don't prevent the original blessing, but you add an Ishmael to your life, a parallel problem that will accompany you for a long time. Have you ever forced something like this? Have you ever entered a relationship you knew wasn't from the Almighty, just so you wouldn't be alone? Have you ever made a deal you felt deep down wasn't the right time, just because you were desperate for money? Have you ever withdrawn your savings early, spent an inheritance before the moment was right, or accepted a job that went against your values just to stay busy? If so, breathe. The Almighty is merciful. The Almighty restores the years the locust has eaten. But you need to understand this pattern so you don't repeat it. From now on, instead of forcing it, you will learn to wait actively. The second great mistake is comparing. You look at your neighbor and think, why do they already have their own home and I'm still renting? You look at a sister in the church and think, why is she already remarried and I'm still alone? You look at your co-worker and think, why were they promoted and I stayed behind? Comparison kills faith. Comparison dries up hope. Comparison makes you lose sight of what the Almighty is doing specifically in your life. Each person has their own timing. Each story has a different chapter written by the Almighty. What works for someone else might be poison to you. What came quickly for someone else might cost dearly in the long run. You don't know what happens inside that person's house after the lights go out. You don't know the weight they carry. Focus on your calling. Focus on your purpose. Trust that the Lord has an exclusive plan for you. The third great mistake is murmuring. And here I need to be very frank with you. Many people have lost their blessing along the way because of their tongue. The Bible is clear. The people of Israel were taken out of Egypt and were heading to the Promised Land. A journey that could have been completed in a few weeks turned into 40 years because of murmuring. An entire generation died in the wilderness because they wouldn't stop complaining. The Almighty does not play with murmuring, not because he is spiteful, but because murmuring reveals a heart that does not trust. And the Almighty does not deliver a promise to a heart that does not trust. He waits for that heart to mature. Have you been murmuring in the last months? Have you been complaining about your marriage, your job, your neighborhood, your church, your children? Pay attention to this. I'm not telling you to pretend that everything is fine. I'm telling you to trade complaint for prayer. Every time you feel the urge to complain, turn that word into a request. Turn it into gratitude for what you already have. Turn it into a declaration of faith for what is to come. Your mouth either opens paths or closes doors. The fourth mistake is abandoning fellowship. Many people, when the weight drags on, begin to drift away from the church, stop praying, stop reading the Bible, stop serving. They think, since it isn't working out, why continue? And it is precisely at this moment that the enemy takes the opportunity to steal everything. When the weight feels heavy, draw closer. When it seems that the Almighty is distant, pray louder. When the silence becomes unsettling, sing a hymn. Darkness flees from light, but it only flees if you turn it on. Let me tell you now about the practical steps to not lose what the Almighty is preparing. Pay attention, because this part is gold. Write it down, share it, watch it again later. First step, daily alignment. Set aside a time of the day, every day, to align yourself with the Almighty. It doesn't have to be 2 hours. It doesn't have to be a long fast. Start with 15 minutes, a sincere prayer, a short reading of the Word, a declaration of faith out loud. This changes the atmosphere of your day. This aligns your spirit with heaven. This positions you to hear the right voice amidst so many voices. Second step, manage what is already in your hand. The Almighty only hands over more to those who know how to take care of the little. If you want a house, start by taking care of your room. If you want a better job, start by doing your current job with excellence, even if no one is watching. If you want a marriage, start by becoming the person that someone else would want to marry. The Almighty observes how you treat the little before entrusting you with the much. This is a spiritual law that does not change. Third step, surround your house in prayer. Pray for your children, citing each one by name. Pray for your spouse, covering every area of their life. Pray for your gate, your walls, your street. This is not superstition. It is spiritual warfare. Your family is the enemy's most precious target, and you are the watchman of this house. Do not abandon your post. Fourth step, close your mouth to what does not build up. Reduce the consumption of negative news. Reduce the time spent in conversations that only complain. Reduce exposure to social media that makes you feel inferior. This is spiritual hygiene. Just as you wouldn't put spoiled food on your plate, don't let poison enter through your ears and eyes. You are what you consume. Fifth step, practice gratitude out loud. Every day upon waking, thank Him for 3 specific things, not abstract things, specific ones. Thank Him for the coffee on the table. Thank Him for the bed that held you throughout the night. Thank Him for the job that many people would love to have. This practice changes your brain, changes your spirituality, and changes the atmosphere of your home. And most importantly, it shows the Almighty that you are worthy of more because you value what you already have. Now I want you to prepare yourself for a final truth that will seal this message. If you have reached this point, it is because the Almighty has something specific for you. It is not luck. It is not my will. It is direction. In God's perfect timing, He does not fail. What is meant for you will not pass you by. What was determined for you before the foundation of the world cannot be stolen by the enemy, cannot be postponed indefinitely, cannot be cancelled because of your past mistakes. The Almighty is greater than your fall. The Almighty is greater than your delay. The Almighty is greater than your age. The Almighty is greater than what you see in the mirror. Perhaps you are thinking, but I am already over 40, 50, 60. Is there still time? Let me answer clearly. Abraham only had Isaac at 100 years old, Sarah at 90. Moses began his ministry at 80. Caleb asked for mountains at 85. Anna prayed for years and received in God's perfect timing. The time of the Almighty is not measured by wrinkles, it is measured by the readiness of the heart. If you are ready, age is no obstacle. If you are not ready, youth cannot help you. One last thing before closing. If you have been crying in secret, if you have been praying without telling anyone, if you have felt that no one understands what you are going through, know one thing. The Almighty sees. The Almighty hears. The Almighty records every tear in a book, and every tear that has fallen from your face has value in heaven. It has not been in vain. It has not been useless. Everything is being transformed into oil, into faith, into spiritual positioning. And when the answer arrives, it will arrive in such a way that it will silence all doubts at once. Now listen. What is meant for you will not pass you by in God's perfect timing. Not before, so it doesn't destroy you. Not after, so it doesn't frustrate you. In God's perfect timing. And that moment may be closer than you imagine. Perhaps this year, perhaps this month, perhaps this week. The Almighty does not give warnings by chance. If you have reached this video, it is because the warning is being given now. Before concluding, I want you to understand one last thing. Many people hear a strong message like this, feel a chill, cry a little, and close the video thinking that is enough. It is not. Emotion without action is like a little seed that falls on asphalt. It will wither. What the Almighty wants to see is not just your emotion, it is your commitment. It is your yes. It is your response. So I ask you now, do you accept waiting actively? Do you accept preparing yourself while the Almighty prepares the stage? Do you accept taking care of what is in your hands while the Almighty takes care of what is out of your reach? Do you accept believing even when the result seems far off? If your answer is yes, comment below. Write it in your own words. A declaration coming from within. Because the mouth speaks what abounds in the heart, and heaven records every declaration of faith. And if you have someone in your family who needs this message, a child who is despairing, a spouse who is doubting, a father who has lost hope, a mother who is tired, share this video with them. A word at the right time saves a life. And you can be the instrument that the Almighty will use to pull someone out of despair. Do not underestimate the power of a share. Often help arrives through a message that someone forwarded via WhatsApp in the middle of the night. Before you close this tab, listen carefully. The Almighty did not bring you here for you to embark back into your routine as if nothing had happened. If this message touched the deepest part of your chest, there is a reason. That is why I prepared a powerful digital book for you. How to know if you are saved for the day of judgment is the next natural step in this journey of waiting and preparation. It takes you deeper into everything we have discussed here. It teaches you how to discern if the signs you have been seeing are from the Almighty. It teaches you how to position yourself spiritually for the turning point. It teaches you how to protect your family from what many people lose when the blessing finally arrives. The link is in the description of this video and pinned at the top of the comments. It is fast, it is accessible, and it can be read on your phone today. Do not leave it for tomorrow. Tomorrow may be too late. Comment "I believe" below, click the link and walk with the Almighty. What is meant for you will not pass you by. In God's perfect timing. Believe. Amen.